Nation Hootenanny, I'm Rachel Nabors. Guys, go.
I'm
I'm
Valhead.
Brian.
Sorry. We've got a nice delay going on here.
Let's try that again. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Animation Hootenanny. I'm Rachel Nabors.
I'm Valhead.
I'm Brian Birtles.
Yay!
Yay!
Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Brian. It's a pleasure to have you here. You are like a really big spec author on the Web Animation API, correct?
Yeah, I'm a spec author on the Web Animation API. Yep.
All right, sweet. Tell us a little bit about who you are, where you work, how you rep the Web Animation API, etc.
So I work for Mozilla in Tokyo, and I got involved in the animation stuff because I used to work on SVG animation in Firefox, and there were all sorts of troubles with animations on the web, so it somehow fell to me to try to tidy things up a bit. So that's kind of
It
why I got
somehow
involved.
felt like no one else was going to take it on, so you just had to do it for them. You're like, guys, this is a mess. I got to take care of it.
Something like that. I think everyone knew there were problems, that SVG animation and CSS animation just didn't line up at all, and everyone knew we needed to fix it, but no one was around to actually do anything about it. And then I put forward some proposals about how we could fix it, and then Vincent Hardy from Adobe just said to me one day, "You should just go ahead and do it," and then show people later. And so that's kind of how it all started.
How long ago was that?
Oh, that's 3 or maybe 4 years ago now.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah.
And quick question, when you say SVG animation, do you mean Smile, or are you talking about CSS animation applied to SVGs? Could you clarify that for the audience?
Yeah, that's Smile animation. So that was around well before CSS animation. So yeah, applying CSS animation to SVG is only a fairly recent thing.
And it's also exceedingly handy.
Yep, definitely.
So how long has the Web Animation API spec actually existed in browsers?
In browsers,
Yeah.
not long. I think Chrome shipped the first parts roughly a year ago. Yeah, and I think we started working on it in Firefox just over a year ago. So at most, maybe a year and a half.
Whoa, so it's a baby API.
So you guys,
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
you started working on it, you said, like 3 or 4 years ago, but it takes a couple of years before, 2 to 3 years before anyone even really starts implementing it? Is that kind of how the timeline went?
Yeah, it did, but I mean, every spec's different. So
Yeah.
some specs kind of start with an implementation, and then just when they're about to ship, someone writes up a spec for it. Other times we spend years working on a spec before we actually get into implementing it, and other times it's very much in parallel. So yeah, it's different for each spec, but this one, yeah, spent quite a while just specking it first, partly because we knew to an extent what the features should be, because we were just trying to get the features from SVG and CSS together. So we kind of had some implementation experience already. So we just focused on the spec initially. Yep.
So what were like the main goals of putting this spec together? Like you said, you saw there's some problems with CSS and SVG animation. Like what were the things you were like, that needs to get fixed? This is the reason I'm making this specification.
Yeah, right. I mean, part of it came about because of Microsoft, because they didn't have either CSS animations or SVG animations, and they didn't want to go ahead and implement both. I guess the other browsers had implemented SVG animation already by the time CSS animation came along, so it wasn't such a big deal to implement one more, but Microsoft kind of thought, well, we don't want to go ahead and implement two totally different technologies for animation. There really should just be one for the web, which is a fair point of view to take. And so they said, we're not going to implement SVG animation unless there's a unified model for how animation works on the web. And so that was kind of the primary goal for web animations, was to bring the two together, but also hopefully address some of the weaknesses in each one at at the same time. So with CSS, trying to synchronize things is difficult. So that was one of the things we wanted to try to fix at the same time. And yeah, with SVG, reusing animations is difficult, so we wanted to try to fix that as well. But yeah, more than anything, just to make them use the same kind of foundation. Yeah, and a lot of people also said when you do that, you should give it an API. So we can see from JavaScript what's going on. So that was kind of a second piece to it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Can you explain more what the API part of it means? I know that's kind of, I mean, not every specification gets that put in its title. Like, how does that make it different?
Yeah. So actually, that's something I didn't want at first. I just wanted to define this abstract kind of model, and then other people said, no, you should be able to use JavaScript to see what's going on, and they were right. I'm glad that they argued with me about that. So that's definitely something which the Google guys I contacted were encouraging me to do, and I'm glad they did. It's kind of, I guess from a casual web developer's point of view, it might not be obvious, but there's a shift in thinking regarding how the web should develop at the moment. In the past, we've put all sorts of features into browsers, and that's had its problems because browsers move very slowly. To get a new feature in there often takes a few years. There's reasons for that. I mean, once we put something in a browser, we can pretty much never take it out. And we've got to get agreement amongst all the browser vendors. We've got to make sure it's absolutely secure and that it's really stable. So it takes a long time to get new features into browsers, but the web moves really quickly. And so there's been this shift in thinking recently, which is that rather than putting all sorts of amazing features into browsers, we should start to expose the building blocks behind those features. And then script libraries and so on can build up new technologies from those building blocks. And they don't have to wait for browsers to put all the features together, as long as they've got the pieces there that they can make stuff from. So that's kind of the thinking behind having an API for web animations, is if we give access to those fundamental pieces that make up animations, and script authors and so on can wrap that up into all sorts of new shapes and make new different kinds of features from that without having to wait for browsers to implement them.
So we have a bit of a problem, guys.
Uh-oh.
It would appear that on the Crowdcast it still says starting soon.
But we totally started.
Oh yeah, it does say off air here.
It says live on mine. Val, does yours say live or off air?
Oh, mine says, I have the chats, but if I go to the middle guy, it says, it does say off air. Waiting for host to click start broadcast is what it says.
I did. I have a stop broadcast button.
Huh, so somewhere along the lines, the internet is clearly confused.
Allow me to hit the stop broadcast button and hope. Oh God, this is gonna.
Let's just all like freeze for a minute, like pause.
Fingers crossed, guys. I might be re-inviting you to this. Just hang in there. Here it comes.